All right, so I come to the conclusion. I don't think that boxing's fake. I think I've changed my mind on that. What I believe boxing is full of terrible fucking athletes. That's what I believe boxing is consisting of, and that's why I think Tyson Fury got his ass kicked by Francis. See, the more I think about it, the more I rewatch, and the more I kind of just analyze it. When you really look at the heavyweight division and just the bigger classes of boxing, most of the guys are not top level athletes, and I almost think this is the same for MMA too, to some degree, where the best athletes typically don't go into fighting. Because say that you are a heavyweight size person, like you can contend at heavyweight. Say you're 6'3", 240 pounds, all muscle, ripped, fast, athletic. Chances are you're going to get scooped up in basketball, football, or basketball. Like the chances of you actually going to boxing and going to go fight people for a living is close to zero. Because it's like, why would I do that? Like, I got to go through all this trouble, the Olympics, fighting 4-round fights, doing all this shit. And by the time I get 7-6 years in a career, then I might finally make some money. Or I can get into the football field, maybe get an NIL deal, go to the league in the NFL where your minimum contract, you're getting paid $500,000, $600,000, maybe even $1 million, if not more, if you're a top round draft pick. And that's just in football. We're not even counting basketball or baseball or any other top sports in the American Western size sports systems. So the chances are you're probably not going to go into boxing. And so when you think about the overall like competition level and the people who actually choose to enter boxing, you're not going to get top flight athletes. You're going to get guys who are kind of just like got bullied for the most part. And so what I saw with Tyson Fury, and I should have probably peeped this when I was watching it, dude, Francis is a way, way, way better athlete. Like, it's not even close. And most of the guys in MMA that are at heavyweight, I mean, they're not great athletes either, but they're much better than the heavyweight boxer athletes. Like, if you look at a guy like Ortiz, Andy Ruiz, Chelsea, and the various amount of other like heavyweight boxers, they're out of shape fat dudes. Bernard Stevenson or whatever his name is, they're heavyweight, they're fat guys. They're basically just big ass guys that are fat that just got into boxing because nobody else is going to fight them. And so when I started doing the math in my head, I'm like, most of these guys probably wouldn't be great. They're not great athletes. They're probably like, if you look at like athletes on like an S class level. So if we say like an S class athlete would be like DK Metcalf or Metcalf or whatever his name is. What's his name? The guy from the Browns, that big ass defensive end, Gerald or whatever his name is. There's a bunch of them. John Jones's brothers. All those guys are huge, fucking fast, elite athletes. And I'm almost positive if you want to put them into like any combat sport, they probably would have been successful, more likely than not. And you know what I did that? Why I believe this? If we take a guy like Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy got into MMA at the age of like 36 or like 35, something like that. And he had like a 3-year career. And somehow he was able to get to the UFC. And he wasn't a heavyweight contender. He wasn't like a top guy. But he won a couple matches against pro guys. Got up to the part where he's fighting on main cards. And gave decent fights. Now, did he get his ass kicked? Yeah, when he got to the highest level, he got his ass kicked. But when you really stop and comprehend that the guys he was fighting had almost decades worth of experience on him, and he's only been fighting for 3 years and just did it after a full-ass football career, taking all the damage you take in football, he was still able to compete despite limited knowledge. Because think about it, even just to be a jiu-jitsu practitioner, 3 years might get you to your blue belt, if that. And then you got to throw in the fact that you got to do kickboxing, you got to do wrestling, you got to know some clinch work, you got to know how to mold it all together. Then you got to build the cardio to be able to fight 3 5-round fights. That's a lot to ask in 3 years. Like, really, you wouldn't even expect that guy to be decent within like 2 years. He would be just like in a contender series maybe. Like most MMA guys, they spend their first, like even Conor didn't get to the UFC till about like 3 to 5 years during of like pro fights from the Cage Warriors and all those other fights in Ireland. Then he got into the UFC where he started fighting like top fights. And even then, his buildup was about 2 to 3 years before he started taking on the main card and got that Jose Aldo and Chad Mendes fight when he started becoming the ultimate superstar. But he had a whole lifetime's worth of work in MMA. And so when you start to consider, maybe combat sports is just not necessarily bringing in the best athletes. And then you even think about just boxing, like how many guys have you ever met like a pro boxer? How many people have actually met somebody who actually boxes like for a living? I don't think I've ever met a pro. I take that back. I probably met a pro boxer 1-2 times in my life, and that was at the age of like 28. In an MMA gym, when I was doing some sparring, I met my first pro boxer. and he was only like 3-0, 4-0. I don't even know where you go to find pro boxing gyms. Like, where do you even start? And even when you think about a guy like Deontay Wilder, yeah, so Tyson, like, you just look at him, he's a wobbly looking, like, potato man type dude. And it's amazing that he was out here just whooping the fuck out of all these boxers. But then what you come to find out is most heavyweight boxers, not good athletes. Not great athletes. And that's why we have this current situation that we see where we consider boxing fake. Now, I'm going to go back on my words and say boxing's not fake. It's just the guys who participate in boxing are not very good. It's like a bunch of freshman players playing a sport that none of the seniors want to go play because they just made up their own fucking sport. And this is what's interesting, because when you go to the lower classes of boxing, the guys appear to be more athletic because there's not a lot of spaces for a guy who's like, say, 5'7", 150 pounds. Not many sportsmen to play. So it makes sense why maybe Mayweather could have always been a great athlete. Maybe he could have been a great soccer player, great baseball player. He could probably play multiple sports. So it makes sense why Mayweather was so dominant. But then we come to the possibility maybe he's not that great of an athlete. Maybe the sport's not that good because McGregor, who have never done it, what if McGregor might be a better athlete? And that was the reason he's able to push Floyd so much. So there's just a larger thing I've been thinking about is like maybe some sports just don't have great athletes. Like even MMA. I always consider part of John Jones' like great dominance was an aspect of John Jones having NFL genetics and being the only guy with like legitimate like better animal factor than most of his competitors. Because if you look at most of the guys he fought, they weren't truly great like athletes. None of those guys were jumping out the buildings. None of those guys look like they can dunk basketballs. None of those guys looking super crazy. Now I look at Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill might be like a top level athlete because he did play basketball in high school. So it makes sense why he was able maybe to adapt to MMA so quickly and get the championship. But yeah, just I think combat sports overall does not tend to attract the best athletes, and maybe that might be the reason why we saw such a close match between Fury and Ngannou.